Recently, economist Raghuram Rajan, a former governor of the Reserve Bank of India and a professor of finance at University of Chicago Booth School of Business, expressed that India should follow a services-led export model instead of copying Chinese manufacturing-led export model. He says India needs to differentiate itself from blindly copying the manufacturing-led growth, which has been the mainstay of the Chinese economic transformation. Multiple times before, Rajan has advocated an increase in spending on education and skill-based training to serve the youth with employment and growth. However, Rajan is completely wrong. He is advocating something that is polar opposite to what India should be doing to develop rapidly. He is prescribing dumb economics, the kind of economics that falters at the most basic level of the subject. Let's see how. Before we continue, I want to thank our video sponsor, Fiverr. Fiverr Learn is a great platform that offers online professional courses created by the world's top experts. From the comfort of your home, you can now learn and master in-demand skills that will get you closer to landing your dream job. Check out their courses across marketing, graphic design, website building, writing, business, creative tools, video and photography. These skills are in very high demand and pay well. Pick a course of your choice and see yourself landing that job or project that you have always dreamed of. Click the link in the description and it will take you directly to Fiverr Learn. Back to the video. Currently, India belongs to the World Bank's lower middle income category with a gross national income per capita of almost $2,200 in 2021. As per this year's classification, in order for India to enter into the high-income category, the country has to generate a gross national income per capita of $13,200. China, with a GNI per capita of $11,900 in 2021, will soon enter into the high-income category. China's massive gross national income of almost $17 trillion compared to India's $3 trillion is based on China's gigantic total national wealth of $85 trillion compared to India's $14 trillion. Now, let's assume, as per 2022 classification, India wants to reach high-income category, or to the levels that China has achieved today, say, by 2040. It involves expanding the capital stock from 14 trillion to well above 85 trillion to enable GDP jump from 3 trillion in 2021 to well above 17 trillion in 2040. But GDP growth doesn't happen in vacuum. A nation has to keep expanding its capital stock, which enables the economic activity to produce higher and higher GDP. After all, it is the availability of capital, whether in the form of machinery and equipment, offices, commercial buildings, and warehouses, that enables the production of goods and services. A developing country not only requires better machinery and equipment to produce goods or provide services more efficiently, but it also needs those machines in lots and lots of quantities to produce huge volumes of goods and services. So the question is, does a service-led growth model work? Can services rapidly expand national capital and GDP without a nation having to focus on expanding manufacturing? A country's national capital stock is typically made up of these four types of capital. Previously, agricultural land used to be the dominant form of wealth. Over the course of development, the composition changes entirely, reflecting the dominance of business activity and housing stock, with agricultural land reduced to a small percent of the total wealth stock of the nation. It is the national wealth stock, or national capital stock, both one and the same, that enables all economic activity, producing an annual output that we call GDP. GDP is made up of consumption and gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation is nothing but all the capital investment or wealth creation that has taken place during the year. It is composed of net domestic investment and depreciation expenditure. Depreciation expenditure, or also called as consumption of fixed capital, makes sure the worn and torn capital is replaced with brand new capital. Its role is to replenish the wealth stock so that capital is replaced when the old one is lost to wear and tear. When a business buys a new packaging machine to replace an old one, this expense constitutes depreciation expenditure. Net domestic investment, on the other hand, is the brand new capital investment. This amount represents the total new wealth added during the year to the existing capital stock of the nation. Depreciation doesn't add up to a nation's annual income. So, when we exclude depreciation from GDP, we arrive at a country's national income. Given that GDP is a derivative of economic activity that happens in a country, let's look at the various types of economic activity that is commonplace to any country anywhere in the world. This is what the classification of economic activity in any given country looks like. Besides agriculture and services, a nation's economic activity includes mining, utilities, construction, and manufacturing. And within manufacturing, there is the light industry manufacturing and heavy industry manufacturing. And heavy industry is made up of upstream industry and final goods heavy industry. All these economic activities can be reorganized into three groups based on their type of value addition in the production value chain, starting with agriculture and mining, making up the raw material extractor group. Their raw material output includes fruits and vegetables, meat and dairy, coal, iron ore, aluminum, other metal ore, crude oil, natural gas, and so much else. This raw material moves to the material processor group composed of upstream industry and utilities. These two industries provide the basic processed inputs that are required to produce final goods and services. Their output, such as sheet metal, chemicals, rubber, refined oil and gas, crude oil extracts, water, electricity, etc., moves to the last group, the final goods producer, which is made up of construction industry, final goods heavy industry manufacturing, light industry manufacturing and services. It is the construction industry and final goods heavy industry that together produce the final capital goods, and it is the light industry and services industry that together produce the consumer goods and services which then make up the GDP of a nation. Construction industry and final goods heavy industry, only these two, together, supply the capital goods that enable depreciation expenditure and net domestic investment. When we look at the whole picture, for any given nation, the existing national wealth stock enables all the economic activity within the boundaries of the nation, producing an income flow, in the form of GDP, which is made up of consumption, net domestic investment and depreciation expenditure. And it is the construction industry and final goods heavy industry, together, supplies the capital goods that replenish national wealth and create new wealth. Construction industry and final goods heavy industry replenish and expand all types of national wealth stock, except agricultural land. Public infrastructure capital, which comprises all the roads, bridges, waterways, dams, canals, ports and airports, gets the material supplies, whether it is sand, cement, concrete, ceramic, glass, steel, or aluminium, directly from construction industry and final goods heavy industry. Likewise, housing capital, composed of all the residential units, whether they are individual houses, apartments, standalone buildings, etc., derive the material supplies, whether it is sand, cement, steel, or glass, directly from construction industry and final goods heavy industry. In the same manner, when we look at the other type of capital, the business capital, whether it is to replenish old capital via depreciation expenditure, or to invest in new capital, derives its goods directly from construction industry and final goods heavy industry. What we see is that the business capital is entirely accumulated from the direct supply of material goods from construction industry and final goods heavy industry manufacturing. Now, this business capital is nothing but the entire plants, machinery and equipment, offices and buildings, owned and operated by various companies that belong to various industries that together contribute to all of the economic activity that happens in a country. Without this capital stock, business cannot function. Without a plant and installed paper-making machinery, a paper manufacturing business cannot make paper or paperboard. Without commercial buildings and warehouses, a retail supermarket business cannot sell the daily essentials. Without the heavy-duty trucks, bulldozers, excavators, and other earth-moving machinery, a mining business cannot properly extract mineral raw material. Without the boilers, cables and transformers, a utilities business cannot produce and supply electricity over long distances. Without buses, trains, and airplanes, the transportation industry cannot efficiently and reliably move goods and people over long distances. Without computers, chips, cables, towers, telecom gear, fiber optic cables, a software development company cannot operate. It is the capital stock owned by the businesses of agriculture industry under primary, mining, utilities, construction and manufacturing industry under secondary, and services industry under tertiary, that together make up the entirety of the business capital stock of a nation. All these industries that produce the entire GDP of the nation derive their supplies from construction industry and the final goods heavy industry manufacturing. when you look at all the economic activities that fall under services, whether it is wholesale and retail trade, transportation and storage, accommodation and food service, information and communication, financial and insurance, education, healthcare, arts, entertainment and recreation. They all derive their capital stock from construction industry in the form of hotel buildings, commercial buildings, office buildings, corporate parks, educational institutions, campus infrastructure, government buildings, hospital infrastructure, theaters, malls, and stadiums. And from the final goods heavy industry, electronics, electromechanical appliances, cars and two-wheelers, trains, planes, ships and boats, and optical and precision instruments. Now, just like all other types of economic activities, the services industry is dependent on construction and manufacturing for its capital stock supply. The entire industry will come to a halt without the supply of stock by the sole producers of capital goods, construction industry and final goods heavy industry manufacturing. Not only that, the growth of the services industry is contingent on a steady supply of capital stock geared for its needs from these industries. When telecom service providers like Vodafone require the latest 5G telecom gear, they are dependent on the electronics manufacturing industry. Likewise, when a new hospital is planned for setup, the developers need the construction industry to build the structure. They need the final goods heavy industry to supply a range of medical equipment and other ancillary goods. The capital stock of the services industry, which only makes up a part of the business capital, and a small part of the national capital, itself is entirely dependent on construction and manufacturing industries for the supply of goods that enables services to be rendered in the first place. So when the expansion of the entirety of the national wealth stock is dependent on construction industry and manufacturing, a low-income country like India has no other option but to pursue the development of those two industries at some point in order to reach high income levels. There are in fact alternatives for nations with small population. Countries with population of less than 10 or even 15 million can eschew manufacturing altogether to specialize in specific industries in which it can develop comparative advantage and deliver exceptional services to grow rapidly. A good example is Chile, with a population of only 15 million in 2000, the country developed its mining industry and benefited from the substantial worldwide demand for copper, which Chile has plentiful. Chile's reliance on mining has evolved to an extent that most of the nation's export basket comprises of metal ore and other commodities. The country uses the entirety of the export earnings to import everything from consumer goods articles to machinery and equipment for all of its domestic needs from industrialized nations. Singapore, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, also has a well-developed export-oriented services economy, dominating in the high-value addition activities such as financial industry, education and research, tourism, ports and logistics. In addition to the strategically oriented services industry, the country also a well-developed manufacturing industry, focused around specific sectors like electronics, precision engineering, biomedical sciences, petrochemicals, etc. But for a country like India, with more than 1.3 billion people, the pursuit of wealth creation and expansion runs through the vital engines of development, the construction industry and manufacturing, and they remain the only path for India towards high income. For Raghuram Rajan to say that India, a nation with 240 times the population of Singapore, shouldn't blindly follow Chinese manufacturing-led export model and instead pursue services-led exports for the betterment of itself, and the world is shockingly dumb. That's it for today. If you have found this video interesting, that's because the content is based on the recently released groundbreaking book in economics, The General Theory of Rapid Economic Development. Vastly original and path-breaking, the book presents certain key discoveries in macroeconomics that totally upend the mainstream economic thinking. Get this copy on Amazon and you will never ever feel the need to buy another economics book again. Like this video and help the channel grow. Please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to get the notification so you will never miss another quality video like this. I'll see you in the next video.